All right, I guess I gotta pull out the PlayStation VR and get those wires all attached because this movie made me want to replay the game. Hello interwebs and welcome to my review of Werewolves Within, the strange choice for a video game to movie adaptation of that PlayStation VR game from a few years ago that's basically a version of Mafia, but with werewolves, that Mafia being that sort of drinking party game that people play where you're trying to suss out who the killers are. This is like you make that werewolves, and that's basically what the Werewolves Within game was. And so this is sort of a movie adaptation like that of that game. Weird choice to make into a movie, but honestly, when I heard that this movie was being made and I saw what it was, I was so excited for it because this is basically all the genres and all the things that I love in movies put into one, and I'm like, I am so here for it because it's a horror comedy. Check. Love that. It's set during winter. I love winter horror. Winter horror is probably one of my favorite settings. I love like things like The Thing, stuff like that. Just winter horror always worked to me, and like very claustrophobic winter horror. So horror comedy, winter horror, a mystery on top of that, like people trying to suss out who the werewolves is. We have werewolf is all this. It kind of has like a Knives Out vibe. It's not as complicated as Knives Out, but it certainly has that vibe. It just like all those elements put into one movie is very much my thing. Mystery, horror, thriller, winter comedy sort of thing. Great job on that front. But how did the movie actually play out? Because video game adaptations do not have a good penchant. But I have to say, this movie was absolutely fantastic. I highly enjoyed it. The comedy, how best to discuss this movie without giving too much away? I think they did a very great job of adapting the dynamics of the game for film, because without spoiling too much, this does eventually come down to like we get to meet all the different villagers, get to know their thing, their deal, sort of what their interests are, and like different ways that they might be angry at each other, upset at each other. There's like a pipeline coming into town that people are voting against. People have animosities. The movie sets those up pretty well, and we have just an eclectic group of characters, and they all start becoming suspicious of each other when they start to realize that a werewolf might be in town. But the movie does a very good job of like keeping you guessing of who might be who might be what, why this might be this thing, and it does that dynamic really well. And if you're going to do an adaptation of Mafia, essentially, I think they did a fairly good job of adapting those dynamics of the game to a film setting, a sort of idea that's very thin on the surface, but kind of plays well when you sort of put it into a movie setting, sort of people just being suspicious of each other and being willing to kill each other off in that sense. The other thing, too, is this very much has like that heightened over-the-top feel. It's not a grounded movie by any means. I don't go in expecting that sort of like very grounded movie feel, grounded horror. It's very theatrical. There's a couple moments where it like teeters on the edge of becoming comical, but it never goes fully over. Like, for example, there's a science character in this movie who at one point, like, she's like studying something on a computer and the camera like pushes in and she's starting to realize that it's a werewolf that might be attacking everybody, and like the lighting on her face gets like overly dramatic and kind of colored, and you're like, oh, is this gonna turn into like an over-the-top comedy? And it has those moments where things start leaning into just pushing it a little bit too far, but it never goes too over into the sense of that it makes me feel like, oh, this is just too much becoming a broad comedy. It still feels like it managed to walk that line of being grounded and not very well. The dynamics of the characters are also like this hinges upon that. They're all fairly archetypical type of characters, but they all feel a lot of fun. The only one that I would say probably frustrates me a little bit is there's two characters in this film. There's a gay couple, and they somewhat lean a little bit into gay stereotypes. I don't think it gets to the point where I'm offended by it. As a member of the LGBTQ community, I'm not a gay man, but it's sort of like in that wheelhouse of like gay stereotype. And it never like got super offensive, but it was sort of leaning in that direction. Again, I know it's kind of hard. Movies like this kind of rely a little bit on archetypes. I think the only movie that really didn't do that, to my mind, recently was Knives Out itself, who did a great job of characterizing every single character. Here, this is like, again, doing comedy stuff. You kind of have to lean on that stuff, so it didn't get into offensive, but it definitely wasn't not there, if that makes sense. But otherwise, I think all the characters are a lot of fun and they have a good time with their roles. You can clearly see everyone's enjoying themselves. I will say the main character of Finn, and I don't say this to be I don't think I've ever identified with a main character in a movie more than Finn. His whole thing is that he's someone who's like overly nice and likes to care about people, but he also likes like to care and like gives big speeches about community and bringing people together. I mean, that's very much in my soul, but the moment they got me and I'm like, oh God, this character is this character is definitely me, is there's a moment where he's starting to realize that there's a werewolf in the community, and he's just going around to all the different things, like he's seeing the scratch marks, and he's like, and he just says heavens to Betsy over and over and over again, like it escalates, heavens to Betsy, heavens to Betsy. And if any of you know, if you watch any of my live streams, the fact that I say heavens to Betsy just it off the cuff in a live stream, I'm just like, oh god, this character is me. So I really don't think I mean, I'm like, he's a sheriff, so I mean, I'm not a sheriff, but like in terms of his temperament and who he is and saying heavens to Betsy, very much this character is me. So I've just heavily identified with him. But the characters were all very good. There's a lot of good comedy here, and there's also good setups and payoffs as well. Movies like this really rely on like you setting up things in the first act and second act, very much Chekhov's guns, and paying them off later on. And this movie does that supremely well. There's a lot of setups and payoffs. There's even some red herring Chekhov's guns here. I don't want to spoil, but there was something that they set up in the first act. You're like, oh, that's definitely going to be a thing later on. And then they use it, but in a way you're like, oh, that's kind of disappointing. But then out of left field, a whole other thing comes in, the sort of murder weapon that kills the monster, I should say. And I was like, oh, that's even better. That's even better that is the thing that does this. It was supremely enjoyable. So overall, I cannot recommend this movie enough. It is by no means a movie that's gonna like set your expectations like, oh my gosh, this was absolutely a bonkers amazing, one of my favorite movies. It's not that level of movie, but if you want a really fun horror comedy that just sets up and pays off everything really well, has good characters, has good moments, and it's just a very enjoyable 2-hour movie that just gives you everything that you want out of it, if not necessarily blowing your mind in any way, I think that this is just a solid good time. It's a movie to get drunk to be very honest with you. Like, get a drink or get high or something, sit down with some friends and just make fun of this movie as you watch it, and just it's a movie that just enables you to just have fun, talk about it, guess who the person is, and just laugh along with the movie itself. So just a fun time, deeply enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. So what do you all think? Did you watch Werewolves Within? Did you see it? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. Beyond that, just thank you so much for watching. I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.